remembered that the new spell Stephen taught me.
Module is cooling down.
They'll be coming in 30 seconds. Stay strong.
Now, a disappearing act.
I know you are unlikely to leave the Fantastic Four, Mr. Greer, but if you are interested, time division.
GLP-1 drugs are everywhere.
GLP-1.
GLP-1s. People scramble to get their hands on GLP-1 drugs.
Today we're going to talk about the psychiatric effects of GLP-1 agonists or medications like Ozempic. And if you're thinking about taking a GLP-1 agonist, or if you're taking a GLP-1 agonist, what you should be aware of, because things are a little bit complicated. Some studies will show improvements in weight gain, some studies will show increases in anorexia, some studies will show improvements in mood, some studies will show triggering of depression. And so what's going on here? And it turns out that actually all of that is true, and that's why we need to dive into it with a little bit more detail. So we're going to start off by doing a quick review of glucagon-like peptide and what its role is in the body. So the first thing to understand is that GLP is a hormone. So the hormones are chemical signals that travel everywhere in your body, everywhere that blood exists. Okay, so the first thing to understand about hormones is that they have differential effects on different parts of your body. So let's use a simple example of hormone, testosterone. So testosterone has differential effects depending on the tissue that it reaches. So the skin cells on the top of my head will make me bald. The skin cells over here will make me actually grow hair. The skin cells on my back will also start to grow hair. So it causes a differential pattern of hair growth depending on the target tissue. When testosterone travels to my brain, it'll increase my sense of protectiveness, maybe some degree of aggression, some degree of competitiveness. When it travels down to my scrotum and testicles, it stimulates sperm production. And so depending on where a hormone travels in the body, it will have a differential effect. And when it comes to GLP-1 agonists, this will explain a lot of the contradictory information. The next thing we have to understand about GLPs is what is the role of glucagon-like peptide? Why does the body secrete it? What is its job? So GLP is a satiety hormone. Okay, so satiety is to feel sated, to feel satisfied. So basically, when we eat something, our stomach stretches, glucose gets entered into our bloodstream, and so our body has these two modes. It has a hungry mode, and it has a no longer hungry or satisfied mode. And GLP is one of the key signals that tells our body when you're satisfied. GLP also works in concert with insulin. So you can sort of think about it like in the same way that you get a food coma from insulin, GLP-1 will signal to parts of your brain that we have had enough to eat. I keep seeing comments, Dr. K, how do I apply this to a situation in my life? That's literally why we created a coaching program. Our coaches are certified on an evidence-based curriculum designed to help you get unstuck. This involves analyzing your patterns, increasing your understanding, and working with you to help you develop a plan to create lasting change. So if y'all are interested, check out the link. If you look at insulin, insulin is focused primarily on glucose metabolism, so it regulates our blood sugar, okay? But GLP is not related to blood sugar, but it is related to other parts of satiety. So GLP travels to this part of our brain called the ventral tegmental area, which is where our dopaminergic reward circuitry is. So when we have a craving, that comes from our dopaminergic reward circuitry, right? Like I want to eat French fries. And then I eat French fries, and then it feels pleasurable. So eating food is tied with pleasure. Eating fatty food, having intense cravings for sugary foods, all of those are tied to pleasure. And I don't know if you guys have kind of experienced this, but like, okay, you can eat a cookie and it tastes really good, and then you eat a second one, and you eat a third one, and a fourth one, and you eat a fifth one. And if you look at the volume of cookies you're eating, like you can eat 5 cookies, and it's not like the same quantity of food, it's not the same volume of food as, let's say, like a big salad that is like low calories, right? But as each subsequent cookie you eat gives you a reduction in your craving, and then your pleasure starts to kind of go down. A lot of that reduction in your pleasure is mediated by GLP. So GLP travels up to your brain and actually inhibits the pleasure that you get from eating food. That same part of your brain, the ventral tegmental area, is also where our cravings come from. So sense. The more you eat, the less you crave eating. The less you get the more pleasure you have. So I have cravings high, pleasure low. And then as I eat, cravings go down and pleasure goes up. And the chemical signal to mediate that shift is a GLP-1. So the GLPs basically reduce our cravings and increase our sense of satiety. So now let's talk about GLPs and addictions, because if we're reducing our cravings and blunting our pleasure, then it should have an impact on addictions, which is absolutely what we see. This is a study that was used AI to analyze people talking on the internet, and basically found that people were reporting when they started GLP-1 agonists like Ozempic that it affects their substance intake. So it reduces their alcohol intake, reduces their caffeine intake, reduces their nicotine intake, seems to have not a huge effect on cannabis. And then in terms of behavioral addiction, seems to reduce compulsive shopping, impulsive shopping, but according to some of these reports, may actually enhance pornography usage. So people become potentially more addicted to pornography or use pornography more when they're on GLPs. So what's going on here? So in order to understand how GLPs affect addictions, we have to understand a little bit more about how they affect the dopaminergic circuitry, okay? So this gets a bit complicated. So this is the way that your dopamine normally works, okay? So we have some level of dopamine that just fluctuates throughout our day. I take a sip of water, that water's tasty. I get a little bit of dopamine, okay? And then there are times where I'm like a little bit bored. Oh my God, this is boring. Like this guy is just like rambling on about dopamine and he's talking about science. Oh my God, that's so boring. So we get a dip in our dopamine. So our dopamine just kind of goes up and down throughout the day. And then what happens is we sometimes get something that is addictive. So I eat a donut, or I play a video game, or I use cocaine. And in those three cases, right, or sometimes all three all at once, I get a spike of dopamine. So the way that GLPs work is by capping the dopaminergic signal that your brain can get. So it doesn't affect our day-to-day dopaminergic stuff, but if we do something that induces a spike of dopamine, it kind of caps that, okay? So the way that you can think about it is like, it doesn't affect the basic speed of our car, it just lowers the top speed that my car is capable of going. I can hit 100 kilometers, but I can't hit 120 or 140 or 150. Now, the interesting thing is that it is the high spikes that make us addicted to things, okay? So it's really hard to get addicted to something that has a low dopaminergic signal. So the things that are the most addictive are the things that give us the biggest spikes. So when my friend says, hey, Dr. K, it's great to see you, like, are you having fun at the party? I'm like, yeah, man, I'm having fun. He's like, you want to go into the bathroom and do some and I'm like, sure, I'll give it a shot. You know, I'm like, wow, that's amazing. So when we get a high spike of dopamine, that is what triggers neuronal rewiring. So we can look at this in other mechanisms like loot boxes. Why are loot boxes so addictive? Because the spike in dopamine that they give us is way higher, because most of the time we get nothing. Occasionally we get a big spike and then we're like, oh my God, I want that high again. This is why people who play the lottery and lose lots of money over the lottery will still continue to play it, because that spike of winning keeps us coming back. So now this is something that's like pretty cool, because the GLP-1, since it prevents the spike, it prevents us from getting addicted to things. It's not that simple, but that's basically the mechanism that it's blunting, which is why we see, it's really fascinating, reductions in a lot of addictive behaviors, okay? And this is what's kind of interesting about it. So now we're gonna tunnel down into specifically alcohol use. So here's a study that's looking at semaglutide or Ozempic on alcohol use. And what we find is that people who are on GLP-1s, it doesn't reduce the number of days that they drink. Okay, so if I normally have drinks 3 days a week, I go to happy hour on Thursday, go to happy hour on Friday, have a wine night on Saturday. Once I start my GLP-1, that doesn't change. I still drink Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. But what it changes is how much I drink. So if you measure the average alcohol concentration in the blood before and after semaglutide, what you find is that the alcohol concentration is way lower. The number of drinks that I have actually drops quite a bit. I still feel like drinking, right? Oh, like I'll have a glass of wine, but whereas I used to have like 2, 3, 4 glasses of wine, now I'm having like 1.5 to 2. And if we kind of think about it, once we understand the neurochemistry, it sort of makes sense because it's reducing my craving. It is
Fleet composition
blunting
updated.
the pleasure that I get from alcohol. So I can enjoy a glass of wine with dinner, but then after you have that first glass, you're like, man, like top me up. Give me a hefty pour, right? After you have that second drink, you're like, fill it up all the way, baby. Like, let's go. As you start to drink a little bit, you want to drink a little bit more. As you start to eat one potato chip, you're like, man, that potato chip was really good. Let me have a second, let me have a third, let me have a fourth. That's what it blunts, right? Because it caps that dopamine. So it appears like we've got pretty decent evidence that it improves a lot of addictions. Alcohol at the top of the list, maybe caffeine, maybe nicotine, maybe impulsive shopping, maybe binge eating for sure. But it may not have much of an effect on cannabis and may actually be harmful when it comes to pornography. Now remember that GLPs affect all the different parts of our brain. And so when it affects the emotional parts of the brain, it appears that it leads to a lot of mood dysregulation that is not good. So it seems to increase feelings of depression, seems to blunt our capacity to experience
composition
pleasure.
updated.
And this is what some people call kind of the Ozempic personality. This is when people are on semaglutide, like they just don't feel like doing stuff doesn't really feel super fun to them, and that kind of makes sense. So it causes some anhedonia. So anhedonia is the inability to experience pleasure. It's one of the hallmarks of a depressive episode, and when people are on semaglutide, we can see how it can cause anhedonia because it is
Fake it until you make it. It's a phrase we've all heard before. Usually it means acting more confident than you really are, dressing a little better than you can afford, or pretending you've got everything figured out while you work toward the life you actually want. But for one Chinese influencer, the line between delusion and reality slowly disappeared. To her 250,000 followers, she appeared to be living the perfect luxury lifestyle. Her social media was filled with designer handbags, expensive cafes, and the kind of life most people could only dream of. But behind that carefully curated image was one of the most elaborate schemes the Chinese internet has ever seen. A story involving fake luxury bags, betrayed friendships, and millions of dollars stolen without anyone noticing. Little Fishballs was born in the 1990s into an ordinary working-class family in Fujian province. By all accounts, she was a well-behaved child. She had average grades, loved being around people, and eventually enrolled at a second-tier university where she majored in broadcasting and hosting. It was during those 4 years at university that her relationship with money began to change. For the first time in her life, she found herself surrounded by classmates from wealthy families. While Little Fishballs carefully stretched her monthly allowance of around 1,500 yuan or $200 to cover food, rent, and everyday expenses, many of the people around her lived in a completely different world. They upgraded to the newest phone without thinking, flew to Hong Kong for weekend concerts, and treated designer handbags the same way most people would buy a new pair of shoes. During her sophomore year, a roommate invited the class to celebrate her birthday at an upscale restaurant. As everyone around the table casually ordered steaks, bottles of wine, and talked about luxury brands and the latest designer bags, Little Fishballs was stunned by the price of every item on the menu. She later admitted she was so uncomfortable that she barely touched the lemon water the waiter had poured for her. That night, her roommate's boyfriend arrived in the porch to pick her up. The birthday girl leaned out of the car window and handed Little Fishballs a dessert that had barely been touched, telling her to take it back to the dorm for a late-night snack. It was probably intended as a kind gesture, but Little Fishballs saw it as a slap in the face. Standing there holding the leftovers as the Porsche pulled away, she felt embarrassed, pitied, and painfully aware of how far she stood outside the world she wanted to belong to. From that point on, she became increasingly obsessed with the world of wealth and luxury. She started spending more and more of her free time online. It was there that she created a new identity for herself, adopting the online handle 小鱼丸子 or Little Fishballs. Fishballs, for anyone unfamiliar, are a popular street food across China, especially in Fujian province where she grew up, so the nickname gave her online persona a friendly, approachable image from the very start. She began posting photos on social media, teaching herself makeup by watching beauty influencers, and saving what little money she could to buy cosmetics. As her photography skills improved, she began to notice something. With the right angle, careful lighting, and enough editing, an outfit costing only a few dozen yuan could be made to look like an expensive designer brand. Little by little, she learned that on social media, appearances don't have to reflect reality. They only have to be convincing. After graduating, Fishball made a decision. Rather than looking for a normal job, she packed her bags and moved to Shanghai, determined to build a career as a modeling influencer. Life in Shanghai wasn't glamorous at first. She rented a tiny room on the outskirts of the city and was determined to stand out and fit into the cruel Chinese beauty standards. She survived on one meal a day, spent hours working out, and devoted herself to building the image she believed everyone was looking for. Slowly, the effort began to pay off. She started landing small modeling and advertising jobs, and for the first time, money began coming in. But instead of improving her situation, almost every yuan she earned went straight back into the online persona she was curating. She moved closer to the city center, traveled to popular influencer hotspots across China, and carefully staged every photo she posted online. Sometimes she would order nothing more than the cheapest drink at a cafe and spend hours taking and editing photographs that made it look as though she lived a life of effortless luxury. As her online following continued to grow, Fishball gradually found herself surrounded by the very people she had tried to become for years. Through Shanghai's influencer scene, she became friends with well-known creators like PP Chang, Sui Jiao Jiao, and later wealthy socialites such as Salami Panini. To her, these women represented the life she had always dreamed of. Despite appearing to fit in, she knew she was different. Many of her new friends had grown up surrounded by wealth. They talked casually about studying overseas, family businesses, and luxury brands they'd owned since they were teenagers, experiences that Fishball couldn't learn. She had spent years carefully building the image that she belonged in that world, but beneath the designer outfits and carefully edited photographs, she knew it was all built on a house of cards. But Little Fishballs had something special, the ability to read people. Friends later described her as thoughtful, dependable, and incredibly attentive. She remembered birthdays, noticed the smallest details, and was often the first person to show up when someone was going through a breakup or a hard time. Over time, she became exactly the kind of friend everyone wanted to have. Before long, she was being invited to parts of their lives that few outsiders ever saw: private dinners, luxury shopping trips, overseas vacations, sleepovers at each other's houses. As those experiences filled her social media feed, her audience grew alongside them, climbing from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of followers. As her popularity grew, so did her income. Brand deals became more frequent, and at her peak, Fishballs was earning around 50,000 to 60,000 yuan a month, roughly 7,000 to 8,000 US dollars. By most people's standards, she'd made it. She'd built a successful career.
I can't believe that you guys would do this. It's unbelievable to me. All the failed games, all the millions of dollars that are being lit on fire, all the developers that are getting caught up in this Thanos snap of layoffs that's been going on, and it's all because you just wanted to voice your opinion online using the microphone that Steam gave you. No wonder these guys are being sued. No wonder these guys are constantly being called for regulation. They're costing these companies a lot of money. We're costing these companies a lot of
Right
money. It's
heroes can make
unbelievable.
all the difference.
There's been a lot of instability in the games industry over the past few years, with more games failing at an ever-increasing rate, and a lot of these games, especially on the
Don't
AAA
have to
side,
be a
in
witch
most
to
cases
find
would
the
have normally
magic
been
in
able
this
to make
world.
back their money,
But
but
it does
something
help.
is keeping these guys from being able to do that. They're having a lot of problems right now. But when you zoom out, you come to realize that while the rest of the industry has been declining, well, Steam has absolutely been exploding. And because of their rise to the top, well, they also brought something more deadly with them: user reviews. Something that we have probably always thought was relatively inconsequential
See
to
if I
us. I
can
mean, it's just us
remember
talking about whether or not we
who
liked a
spells
game,
Steven
trying to get people to play a game that we enjoyed, or stay away from a game that we
He'll be
didn't
coming
like.
in 30 seconds.
But
Stay strong.
it's something that originally just really didn't have that much of an impact. But that was before Steam grew. See, now Steam is some odd 6 or 7 times larger than it was when Steam reviews came out,
You
and
mean
now
back
it's one of
when
the
you
largest
used
platforms, or
children as
the
weapons
largest
in
platform
your
in the
crusade
entire
against
industry, and
mankind?
the effects of those reviews are now devastating. So today,
Then
we're
at
going to
least
talk
we can
about
finally
the
agree.
numbers,
Battle starts
because we
in
now
5,
actually have the proof of
4,
just how
3,
much our reviews
2,
impact a lot of
1.
these games that are coming out. We know exactly how much money it's actually costing
need to
some of
stop
these
that
studios, and
vehicle.
also, well, how quickly that money can disappear just because customers are telling each other. I've also went out of my way to also poll my own audience and ask people exactly how they use the Steam store, and what I've come to find is that
Feeling stronger
the
already.
industry is completely lost control. Before that, I wanted to give a quick shout out to Starport Systems and thank them for sponsoring today's video. This has been the most reliable machine I've ever had. These guys have the best pre-built systems in the entire universe. If you guys are looking for a pre-built, these guys go and check out. Check out the link in the description. Thank you. I don't think people fully understand just how weird the games industry is right now. I've got a former PlayStation executive and another formerly of EA and Epic teaming up in my replies because I called them out for describing players who were voicing their opinions as self-centered and entitled over conversations about physical media and ownership. These guys genuinely think that they know better than you. They think that they are entitled to your money, and somehow that the customer is still the problem while this entire industry is just spinning out of control. I mean, PlayStation and Xbox just reported some of their worst months in decades. Layoffs are basically an annual tradition now, and franchises that used to print money are falling apart. Battlefield lost its players. Call of Duty has had its worst sales in nearly 2 decades. Dragon Age almost folded its entire studio. Ubisoft's biggest franchises have drugged them near collapse. The Halo campaign evolved. Halo, out of all franchises, has just embarrassed itself. With a peak of only 25,000 concurrent players on Steam and reportedly only 1% of their users being on PlayStation. Now, there are a lot of reasons for this, and a lot of reasons that we've already talked about on this channel. Prices are going up, quality is going down, the cost of living is brutal, and, well, a lot of these companies are moving their games away from the people who would actually want them. But while the traditional industry and a lot of these guys, like these executives that are talking shit, have spent the last decade sliding backwards, Steam has kept growing. Basically the only company. And I think part of that is pretty simple. Players have gotten louder, our opinions have gotten louder, and Steam has given those opinions a place where they can actually cost somebody money. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think the players have been louder than they are today. If the game is good, you know about it. If the game is bad, you definitely know about it. When one of these companies does something that players don't like, they make it impossible to ignore. And nowhere is this become more consequential than the second of Steam, where those opinions can now cause a player to absolutely tank. And keep in mind, years ago, buying a game was a lot more trusted. Watch a trailer, maybe read a couple reviews from a games journalist, look on the back of the box, and just kind of hope that the thing that you were buying was what these guys were actually advertising. Unless there was some enormous controversy that was surrounding the game, there's probably a pretty good chance you wouldn't hear about any performance issues or missing features, aggressive monetization, or some dog shit account requirement until after you'd already handed over your money. And what nobody has realized is that while all that had gone past, well, Steam has completely changed this process. Valve launched Steam reviews back in 2013 when the platform had just crossed over 7 million concurrent users, and at that time, reviews were useful, but Steam's platform really wasn't all that big, so, well, those reviews really didn't have that much of an impact. Fast forward to today, and while traditionally the next decade in the contest of who can suck harder, Steam is absolutely exploding. The platform now peaks at a concurrent player count of more than 42 million players. And that's roughly 6 times the audience that they had when they first launched. A system that once had just collected the opinions of a relatively small corner of the PC gaming space, now places a collective verdict of the largest gaming audience in the entire world directly in front of every potential customer. And you can follow a game for years. You could watch every single trailer. You could get swept up in the marketing. You could reach that store page with the full intent to buy it. And you saved up the money, but then you see one word before you even reach that purchase button. Suddenly, that game doesn't look all that exciting anymore. You start scrolling to find out, oh, the performance is terrible. The servers barely work. Half of the features are missing from the game, and the publisher also slipped in something that was conveniently never in the trailers for the game. The entire marketing campaign now has to survive contact with the people who already bought the game. And we finally have an idea of just how powerful that has become, how powerful Steam has become by extension. Games Discover Co. recently published the results of a survey looking specifically at how people are using Steam reviews and how much those reviews influence their purchasing decisions. And when players who asked how often they check Steam reviews before buying, more than 70% said either always or most of the time. And the rating itself doesn't even have to be that bad for these guys. guys to start walking away. More than 20% of people said mostly positive already makes them less likely to buy. 30.8% draw the line at mixed or below, and 34.6% said mostly negative or below. The sales data makes this even more brutal. Games that are sitting between 60 and 70% only convert about 18% of their wish list into first month sales. Once they cross the line to 70%, that jumps up to 29%. Games that are above 95% positive convert 51% of their sales. Dropping into mixed doesn't just cause you a small decline, it can wipe out more than a third of the game's potential sales, and nearly 2/3 compared to the best reviewed games on the platform. Now, I wanted to see if these numbers would actually hold up against a much larger group of people, so I ended up running my own polls just to be able to test the data. And I asked people whether a negative Steam review score had ever stopped them from buying a game that they had already intended to purchase. 17% of people said always. Another 71.8% said sometimes, and only 11.1% said never. Then I asked what people do when they actually notice a game with mixed ratings or lower. Said they will always go and read the review to find out why. Another 29.8% said sometimes, and only 6.3% said never. So nearly 9 out of 10 people have had Steam reviews interrupt the decision that they intended to make already. And more than 9 out of 10 will also investigate the moment that they see that wrong. These are not people that are aimlessly scrolling through Steam with no intention to buy anything. These are people that already knew about these games. They already seen trailers, they followed the coverage, and they developed enough interest to be able to actually go to that page. They were considering spending money on it. The publisher's already done the hard part. They got them all the way to the store page, and then the people who had already bought the game first convinced them to walk away. That is an insane amount of power for one little section of the store page to have. A company could spend 5 years and hundreds of millions of dollars trying to make a game. They could spend another $100 billion trying to convince you to buy it. And then the most important part of the entire campaign comes down to 2 words written by Steam, and some guy that played it for 2 hours already returned it and said that the game deleted his save. At that point, the rating is now a part of the product. A $70 open world RPG is not just a $70 open world RPG anymore. It's a $70 open world RPG with a mixed rating. For most people, that basically means, do I really feel like playing this? And if you get the data, most of the time, the answer is no. Now, if we go and reverse that, well, we get a completely opposite answer. Some random indie game can come out of nowhere from a developer nobody has heard of, no massive marketing campaign, but if it says overwhelmingly positive, people immediately go, okay, what is this? Thousands of people have already taken the risk, and those people are giving that rating a level of credibility that the developer would have never been able to actually buy through advertising, and that's huge. It's a huge reason why we're seeing a lot of these games exploding on Steam right now, while a lot of these massive AAA releases are struggling. Steam doesn't care how much the game costs. They don't care how famous the publisher is or how some executive feeds their bonus. If the game is good, the reviews can actually become the best marketing campaign in the entire world. If it's bad, it's probably going to bury it. Criticism used to live somewhere else. It was in magazines, and videos, and forums, and social media places you would have to go looking for it. Steam put all of that and put it right in front of you while you still had your wall. Publishers have been dealing with people complaining about their games for years, but they've never had to deal with people that have been standing right beside the buy button telling everybody else not to press it. I really think the Steam review system is having a massive impact on the games industry. Most of these guys probably didn't even notice it happened because it kind of happened slowly over time. When you see a platform increase its player count by 6 or more times, that means that the volume of the game is going to increase, but it also means that the amount of people that are reading those reviews is more, because somewhat like 3% of players are the ones that actually leave any of these reviews. So if you put that numbers of people reading them, it's absurd how many people are actually reading these reviews and making decisions based on what those reviews are saying. And it's making them matter more and more. And this has all been happening while the rest of the industry has been declining. And I just think that these 2 things are lining up almost perfectly. And the other thing that I think is really important to bring up, I really do, is that on Steam, you see the review score before you see anything else. It's literally planted right there next to the game's trailer. You have to scroll down to actually see the purchase of, like, whether you're going to buy the regular edition or collector's edition or whatever else. That stuff's lower. So the first thing that you're going to see is what everybody else is saying about the game, and of course that is going to have an impact on what you're thinking. This is a complete inversion of the dark patterns and just general marketing practices of basically any other industry. In most cases, companies want buy now to be the very first thing that you see, the option for you to be able to do that. But Valve, putting transparency first, transparency above all in this case, throws everything that you need in front of you before you can even add it to the cart. Like, psychologically, it's such an inversion of what so many of these companies are wanting, and I guarantee it just makes these guys so mad. And, you know, from a business perspective, it makes sense for these guys because by doing that, they are lowering their rate of returns. They're also lowering any, like, customer service tickets that they have or anything like that. This is more of a strategic move than it is a benevolent one.
Let's
But
see
it
if I can
absolutely
remember that
drives
new
these
spell
companies
Steven
crazy.
taught me.
I know that for a fact because if you go and look at their platforms,
For now.
buy now is the first thing that you see. It's the first option you have in some cases. The second you select that game screen, it automatically puts your cursor onto the buy now thing. And it just kind of goes to show with this review system, we don't have to trust anything these guys say anymore. We can just listen to each other, listen to other players. Their influence over the media, their marketing, their sponsorships, any of that stuff, none of it matters in the face of other players just explaining their experience to other people that bought the game before they buy it or whatever it might be.
3,
And
2, 1.
they actually really can't do anything about it. The only choices they have is either A, remove your game off the Steam, which we're definitely not going to do, but they either have to fix these issues, what we oftentimes see with games on Steam, or they just have to be okay with it being out there. The players do not like this game and do not agree with the media and do not agree with anybody else about the game's condition or what the game represents, and man, these guys do not like it. That doesn't mean they don't try to see it. Now, I want to be clear, I love Steam, but I don't think Valve is doing any of this stuff to the heart. Their approach to transparency, old school business, old school currency, the more trust that you have with people, the more likely they are to spend money, the more likely they are to come back, and also to create fewer problems for you in the future. I learned this when I used to work in commission sales. One of the best salesmen in our entire company was a guy that nobody could ever catch on the game. He could never hold on to any of the money that he made because he was constantly dancing around prices, contracts, and just straight up lying to customers. Those customers would then find out later, charge back, and anything sold to them, and it would just create more problems for everybody else. Management constantly would tell me to not spend as much as this guy, but over the course of the year, I would always come out on top because I was just being honest with people. I would explain everything, including the parts that would make some people walk away. That would cost me some sales up front, but the sales that I did make, well, they stopped. Also, those customers are more likely to come back later and buy something else. It's exactly what Valve is doing right now. Putting everything in front of you might cost them also issues in the future, but it also means fewer refunds, fewer support issues, and customers. Valve is making more money by helping people with bad purchases, and publishers, well, they hate it because that same trust in Steam is costing them sales. Multiple outlets reported that Ubisoft has had internal conversations with Steam about hiding concurrent player counts. Journalists and developers have called out
fate
for
isn't sealed
tighter
yet.
moderation of user reviews, arguing that Steam allows for too much freedom of speech and not enough censorship. Developers got angry when Valve was clearly showing whether reviewers had bought the game or received it for free. Others have criticized Steam for allowing reviews that they consider to be hateful, letting users tag games in ways that publishers can't control, or create groups like Sweet Baby Detective to single out games that they don't want to support. These complaints all sound different, but they all say the exact same thing. We want control. Current player counts show whether or not somebody is actually playing. Purchasing disclosures show whether or not that trade is a customer or somebody that was handed a free copy. User tags let players be able to describe the game in a language that publishers never approve of. None of this stops the company from selling a good game. It only stops them from controlling every piece of information surrounding the game. And that's not to say that Valve ignored problems with review bombing. In 2019, they added warnings for off-topic review activity, showing players exactly what had happened and giving them context before they made up their minds. But that still didn't mean that they would remove or censor any of those reviews. The scores you got are still the scores you got. And that wasn't enough for some developers who pushed back against Valve and asked them to delete or alter their scores, only for Valve to respond. I understand how frustrating it is to see inaccuracies or exaggerations, but we are aren't in the position to verify the accuracy of statements made in user reviews, and we don't try to moderate reviews based on accuracy. On top of that, removing reviews can easily lead to concerns from players about censorship or even that malicious behavior is being hidden. It is much better to continue to work on the product while letting the community use the helpful features to surface reviews they actually agree with or find to be uninformed. Valve is basically saying that we understand that this is upsetting, but we trust our users in the integrity of the system matter more. They'll label the activity and give people context, but they're not going to silence the people behind it, which is honestly unbelievably based, especially right now as we're seeing more platforms that are pushing for heavier censorship, and some of them even requiring your identity just to be able to play a game or exist online. It is refreshing to see a company that is willing to stand on business and say that players have a right to voice their opinions without being censored. Because Valve doesn't wipe any of that criticism away, publishers just can't wait for everybody else to know what's happening. Review scores have now gone way further than I think a lot of people expected. They don't just decide whether a game gets punished right now, they decide whether a game even ever gets forgiven. Publishers love to announce that something has been fixed. They'll tell everybody that they've listened, they've learned, they've completely turned the game around, but none of that matters if the people actually playing the game still say that it's broken. I went and I asked my audience, what do they trust most when a poorly reviewed game claims that it's finally been fixed? 71% of you guys said recent game reviews, 3% said content promotion, 6% said patch notes. Game journalists got 0%, not 1%. I couldn't even round it up. I'm so proud of you guys. You guys lost the patch notes. And I think that says everything. The publishers can make the claim, developers can list every single change that they made, journalists can write a comeback story, themselves, but most people still want confirmation from actual customers. They want to see whether or not the people who were doing before have actually changed their minds. And I think that's another thing that Steam gets right. Recent reviews give developers a way back, but they have to earn it. They can't declare that the game has been fixed, launch a redemption campaign, and then reset the entire conversation. The score changes when the experience changes. And customers get to decide when that actually happens. That's probably why this system drives so many of these publishers insane. They don't get to control the original verdict. They can't erase it. They don't get to decide when the audience forgives them. There is no reset button. Monster Hunter Wilds is probably the clearest example of all of this. That game had sold 10 million copies in its first month, but performance issues dragged that game into overwhelmingly negative territory on Steam, and it only managed to get another million over the course of the following year. Capcom now says that the game has been fixed, but recent reviews still say that the game is fixed. Players are still reporting performance issues. Sold by Monster Hunter Rise, a game that came out 4 years ago. That's what happens when the customers do not agree with the comeback story. Capcom can say that it's fixed, but they don't get to decide when everybody believes them, and that's the beauty of Steam reviews. A terrible launch can still stay attached to the game. A bad update still shows up in their review graph, and when these developers genuinely fix things, recent reviews can move things back in the opposite direction. Steam keeps it all there in case anybody wants to see it before they start handing over any money. One review means almost nothing. 10,000 of them can stop sales yelling into the void and place their collective opinion exactly where it could cost the company money to make them even more money. And I think that's a huge reason why Steam has continued to grow while so much of the industry has spent the last decade falling apart. Valve built a platform where customers don't just blindly trust the company selling them something. They can see what happened, hear from people who have already paid, and also make the decision for themselves. That system isn't always fair. People are always going to do stupid things. There's going to be some angry, political, dramatic, unfair, and sometimes completely wrong stuff that you're going to see posted on the platform, but the alternative is giving publishers control over what customers are allowed to know, what they're allowed to say, what they're allowed to complain about, and that's just not fair to anyone, even the games themselves. And I'll take the messy version every single time. Steam reviews didn't just give players somewhere to complain, they gave those complaints consequences. They gave good games a way to succeed without permission, bad games nowhere to hide, and customers more power over this industry than I think any of us fully realize. As I said before, you were the one that did this. You, voicing your opinion and voting with your wallet, have made consequences come to these companies. You have made bad decisions so incredibly expensive for these guys to make, and as they continue to rack them up, well, things only continue to get worse for them, and that's why we see the industry is taking this damn it, never fall! The industry is starting to shift in our direction, and a lot of these companies are not able to survive. It's one of the reasons arguing with a lot of these executives online recently because it's just like these guys have completely lost the concept of having goodwill for customers, treating them with respect. In a lot of cases, you don't even need to respond to something individually. You can change the information. All you need to do is try to make sure that you're the service and benefit the product to those customers. Keep your mouth shut. These guys just can't help themselves. The industry has been wanting to frame a lot of these changes recently on market headwinds, on just the market adapting to new trends. The only headwind that I've seen is that consequences are arriving a lot faster than they used to. When you go out and you launch a stuff or a game that's just not working or there's something wrong with it, whatever it might be, just because of how quickly information travels, there's not really a way for you to get away with it. It's just going to get dogpiled almost immediately. We see that with like every single launch. Days, if not hours, of some of these games launching it. Look at Halo Campaign Evolved. That game got fried the minute that it came out because the game itself was good. It was absolutely deserving of it. And I actually just saw recently that Master Chief Collection actually has more players playing it right now than Campaign Evolved. It makes a lot of sense because at least those games actually have multiplayer.
Don't give them another
Just complaining about it. I think what a lot of these companies do is they just embrace the business model that Steam has taken. These guys want the same money that Steam has, but for the reason these guys just won't adapt the same model that these guys use to be able to make it. They don't want to put in the labor. They don't understand how profitable it is, just how much Steam, looking at them, they're the most profitable company in the entire games industry. They have every bit of information necessary for them to be able to make a good purchase. And that's something a lot of people are looking for. The internet is just not a very trustworthy place pretty much across the board. You have no idea who anybody is or what their intentions are, but at least with Steam, you have a collective of so many people that are sharing the same hobby, have the same interests, and are looking for the exact same things. Becomes pretty strong when they can actually all voice their opinions together. You guys are driving me crazy back here. Anyway, but you know, whether it's their review system, whether it's their refund policies, whether it's just anything that they do to operate their platform, they could learn so much from all of these guys, and that's really what needs to happen. Otherwise, things are just only going to continue. That's all I can say. Anyway. Let me know what you guys think of the video. If you guys enjoyed the video, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, share it on social media. Do you guys use Steam reviews? How do you use Steam reviews? Are they valuable to you? I'm actually kind of curious. This is a question I didn't ask. If you're somebody that's on another platform, do you come and use Steam reviews as well? I know I did. When I was on Xbox, I was using PlayStation before I became a PC gamer, before I joined the... Before I joined the Master Race.
You don't have to be a witch to find the magic in
I
this
used to use
world.
Steam reviews because it was
help.
really helpful for me. So, I don't know. Maybe you guys do too. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe. The cats obviously say bye. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
Let's see if I can remember that new spell Steven taught me.
Ready to rock, big fella?
30 seconds before you attack.
This is only
Get
half
ready.
the story. We haven't even got to the good part yet. Wall Street didn't destroy video games in a single night. It did it systematically,
With you,
incrementally, and then
perhaps.
more
But your
recently,
fellow mutants may not be as welcome.
explosively.
Give them a chance
And there's a
to
reason
know
for
the
that.
true you, and
The
they will
transformation
see
from
the
2010 to
error of
2019
their
brought a
ways.
major wave of investment into gaming. You guys can see this across nearly every publicly traded company in the industry, and it did more than just change how games made money. It re-engineered the relationship between the people that were making games and the people that were playing them, or better yet, who they were making those games for, because the industry started to move away from selling standalone products and more towards what is better known as servitization, turning the games industry into an ongoing service itself. For players, that meant that these companies became increasingly more focused on leverage, value extraction, and satisfying Wall Street. The first place that we saw this was with development cycles getting longer and the rise of minimum viable products. As investment continued to pour in, AAA companies have to expand because have to sell their actually investing in growing properly. It's part of their fiduciary responsibility. They went in and they hired more people. They created specialized roles. They built increasingly more complicated production pipelines. Something as simple as creating a character that only took a couple of people now could involve a concept artist, modelers, texture technicians. You got rigging technicians and engineers and motion capture teams, maybe even a few other people as well. This improved the individual asset exponentially, but it also increased the time and money it took to actually make them. And as those budgets grew and as that time went on, these publishers needed to recover that money earlier while still continuing to show their investment growth. DLC, downloads, patches, and live service games gave them the infrastructure and an option that they just didn't have in the past. See, before, when you wanted to ship a game, well, you had to test that game because if it was a broken product, well, people would return it. It would also mean immediate losses. Now, they could ship on time and fix it later. QA could be cut. Day one patches became normalized. Content was held back and sold separately in some cases. Players became unpaid testers while publishers still collected revenue and stayed on schedule. I'm interrupting the video because I'm actually packing and editing with the exact same time, but that's not the only place that these guys cut to increase their margins. The other place is the actual game boxes themselves. This is Diablo 3 from many years ago, and I got it on CD. And art book that shows the different characters, minds about the world and its lore. They gave me guest codes to be able to give to other people, so I can have my friends play the game. And this is one of the first places these guys look to be able to cut costs, to be able to increase their margins, and keep their shareholders happy. This is something they did specifically because they were just trying to make more money. It had nothing to do with us, nothing to do with our experience, nothing to do with the value of us. No, they were looking to cut away the value that is to us and to be able to give us. Another way a lot of these companies look to increase their profits while still taking in a lot of this investor money was actually through services. In 2013, Xbox announced the Xbox One, an all-inclusive media hub looking to capture revenue from television and streaming services. Later that year, PlayStation put online multiplayer behind PlayStation Plus, something that they charged $12 for that they historically didn't charge anybody for. Microtransactions became increasingly more normalized. Almost every single online multiplayer game had its own storefront. The game was no longer just something you bought, it was something that you were expecting to keep spending on. At this point, the customer just stopped being the priority. It became something to maneuver and leverage more money to be able to please their shareholders. The industry started dragging out franchises, chopping those games up in pieces and selling them back to us. They had patches to be able to ship their games unfinished, and then they buried everything over subscriptions, storefronts, and services. Every single time we lost something, these companies seem to be rewarded with more investment. Look at the charts. The numbers just kept going up. I had this realization recently that all we ever get right now is the There are still some highlights, mostly inside of indie and AA independent studios, but AAA has become increasingly more pervasive every single year. And it took a long time for a lot of us to be able to notice this because it was gradually happening over the course of 20 years. The reason it feels so much worse today is because the next 20 years of investment and Wall Street's influence ended up happening in 5. And would you guess it, Fortnite is a major reason why Fortnite took off in 2018, popularizing free-to-play, battle passes, and modern live service. Investors saw the future of reoccurring revenue that seemingly had no ceiling, and publishers began promising their own version of it. Then, COVID came in, threw napalm on the fire, exponentially increasing Wall Street's influence, which is why we see it as aggressive as it is today. With everybody locked inside, gaming exploded, the media, the government were calling this the new normal. New consoles had launched, games had moved to $70 to show even more confidence in the platform. Wall Street projected impossible growth, with some firms saying that microtransactions were going to triple their revenue, and in some cases, the industry itself is going to quadruple in revenue in just 2 years. All the publishers went all in. Investment doubled, tripled in some cases. Hundreds of studios were reportedly working on live services. By 2024, nearly every single one in the industry claimed that they were pursuing live service at least. But the new normal was never normal. Lockdowns ended, all of the projections were wrong, people returned to their lives, growth slowed, but for whatever reason, investors still expected a return. The industry had overextended itself, and now it had to actually
Voltron
pay
is
for
not
everything that they
here,
had built.
yet I
The
still
live
feel
service
his
bets that they had
presence.
made had
I
failed.
remember
Many
it
of
all
these
too
games had no
well.
clear audiences because they were actually built around investor expectations instead of actual players. They released and died or were canceled before they even made it out the door. After a
30 seconds
decade
before
of
you attack.
bending to these
Get ready.
shareholders, expanding their teams, and inflating their budgets, many AAA companies have just lost their ability to understand what they were even making games for, who they were making games for. Even their single-player games struggled because, well, they just couldn't meet the financial expectations that had been attached to them because of all their investment. Xbox declined. Ubisoft nearly collapsed. Actually, it pretty much has collapsed at this
Battle
point.
starts in
Publishers
5,
missed their targets,
4,
canceled projects,
3,
closed studios, and
2,
laid off thousands of people. And as
All
the
you need to
industry
do is
started
capture
spinning
the
out of
mission area.
control,
Got it?
it turned to taking away your leverage as the next answer. As growth became harder to find and these companies were losing money, they needed to find more ways to be able to please their shareholders and show that they were still making money. And, well, what they did is they essentially just looked for ways to stop serving their players and instead started looking for new ways to make players more dependent on them. Hardware costs are rising. While I'm sure these companies aren't necessarily thrilled about that, they are finding ways to use it. If you can't afford a console, then they can rent it, lease it to you, maybe bundle it into a payment plan. If you can't afford that, then maybe you can afford the cloud. If you can't afford the games, then you have subscription services. Creating a world where you own neither the hardware nor the games, and you can be charged for it indefinitely. The same thing is happening right now with physical games. Getting rid of discs gives PlayStation and Xbox more control over access and price. A physical game can be discounted by retailers, bought used, resold, traded, or just left to somebody else. A digital game can sit at full price for years because, well, nobody's actually competing with that inventory, and no secondary market is going to be forcing that price down. Even if PlayStation continues to put their game codes inside of retail boxes, everybody knows where that leads. Once there's no disc to actually preserve, lend, or sell, most people are going to stop going to the stores entirely, and they're just going to buy them directly off of the console. There is no benefit to the customer here. It is a cheaper option for the platform builders. They're removing their competition, and they're making your access dependent on their storefront, servers, and their continued commitment. What makes matters worse is that none of these companies are even using this to differentiate themselves anymore. Years ago, if you wanted to play online without paying any money, you had PlayStation or Nintendo. Now, all three platforms charge to play online. When Nintendo moved prices to $80, Xbox was the first one to follow. During the Xbox One era, Microsoft tried to push digital licensing and restrictions on trading games. PlayStation responded with one of the most legendary campaigns ever to completely crush the Xbox One, showing how easy it was to hand somebody a physical game. Sony defended ownership because it gave them a competitive advantage. One generation later, and they're all moving in the exact same direction that Microsoft was. This is what I mean by these companies are not actually competing with one another anymore. They still compete over exclusives and platform loyalty, but when something gives them more control or profitability, they all arrive at the exact same answer. Paid online, higher prices, subscriptions, digital distribution, closed ecosystems, less ownership. They don't need to sit in a room and all agree on it. Their incentives already point them in the exact same direction. And all that control does not end with just the store. Call of Duty records voice chats for moderation, kernel level anti-cheat and anti-piracy software.
By the eye of Agamotto!
Information, age verification is being worked across all kinds of different games and platforms right now with very little pushback. Payment processors can pressure storefronts to use legal content without any laws ever being passed. This industry wants more control. That's why the ESA and Video Game Bureau are out here lobbying against stop selling games as your right to ownership. Hell, they're even labeling private servers in Minecraft as illegal behavior. They want that control so they can monetize your assets. EA is out here announcing EA advertising, allowing brands to place advertisements and sponsored content directly inside of its games. Now, your attention can be monetized and sold while you're playing. This is why I brought up the purpose statements at the beginning of the video. Every business exists to make money, but that's not supposed to be their only reason for existing. It's also supposed to be providing something useful to the people that are supporting it, and also the society that is allowing it to operate. Competition and regulation is supposed to keep these companies in check, especially when they actually start getting really successful. It's to keep them from becoming oppressive, because without those limits, these companies stop asking how they can serve their customers, and they start asking, well, how much value can we extract from them? How can we make them dependent on us? And that's where the AAA industry is right now. Wall Street looked at the trust loyalty and communities that these companies had spent decades building and reduced it all to reoccurring revenue, engagement, and growth. And chasing those numbers, publishers traded away their audiences that made them valuable. They
Pick your hero. Or villain. I'm not judging.
While Askin faces off against Kisuke Urahara deep within Vahirvelt, something interesting happens inside his mind. He runs through a list of 5 names. Ichigo for his potential, Kenpachi Zaraki for his fighting ability, Ichibei Yosebe for his wisdom, Sosuke Aizen for his Reiatsu, and lastly Kisuke Urahara for his incalculable tricks. This is revealed within chapter 662. It's the only time that we hear about these 5 special war powers, as they are laid side by side next to each other, along with a specific reason for why each of them made the cut. Now this list is far more interesting than it first appears. The Vandenreich spent 1,000 years in the shadows gathering intelligence on the Soul Society. Their archive, the Daten, contained the abilities, strengths, and weaknesses of practically every Shinigami of note. They knew everything about their enemy, while their enemy knew nothing about them. And yet, out of that entire millennium of secret espionage, out of all of the Gotei 13 squads that we've seen, the Royal Guard, and every rogue element in between, only 5 Shinigami were singled out as threats that could genuinely decide the fate of the war. Now, I want to clarify, these are not the 5 strongest Shinigami, or not the 5 Shinigami with the flashiest Bankai or ability. The 5 special war powers are ranked for being unknown. They all have question marks, from Yuhabag, who is able to see every possible future, but he is still not able to provide an answer to each of them. In this video, we'll be breaking down what the special war power designation actually means, why each of these 5 specifically earn their place on Yuhabag's list, and the deeper mechanic hiding underneath this entire concept, which ties directly into the one weakness of the Almighty. I'll be pulling everything that I can from the manga, from Kubo's Q&As on Club Outside, as well as information from the Bleach light novels, because the novels quietly recontextualize at least 2 members on the list. But you know which group of individuals Yuhabag would have listed as these 6 special war powers? These are the people who are subscribed to the channel. Only 20% of the people who watch these videos are subscribed, so if you enjoy the content and want to see more, then hit the bell notification icon on the subscribe button for even more videos just like this. Before we get to the individuals, we need to clear up the biggest misconceptions surrounding the entire concept of a special war power, because the term itself is doing a lot of heavy lifting. In Japanese, the designation is Togi Senryoku. Viz officially translated this to the term special threats. Broken down literally, it means something closer to specially noted fighting forces. Again, this is a lot of military speak. These are beings important enough to be specifically written down in the records of a military empire that catalogued everything. And the reason they were noted down comes from Askin's own explanation. Each of the 5 was chosen for that unknown quantity. In the raw text, the word is Nichizu, an unquantifiable variable. So no, this is not a power ranking. A regular captain, no matter how powerful, is a known quantity. You're able to study and measure them and build a counter. A special war power is somebody whose decisive trait cannot be measured at all, which means no amount of preparation guarantees you anything. That's the thing that a strategist actually will lose sight over. Not the biggest number on the battlefield, but the number that he is unable to even read. The manga also gives